Awesome. Thanks so much, Will. So as mentioned, my name's Kevin. I'm a developer advocate at Vonage. We are a cloud communications platform. So we have a set of APIs that let you do messaging with platforms like SMS, but also Facebook, WhatsApp, and Viber. Voice, that's voice over IP, but also telephone calls, video, and a bunch of other things related to communications. Today, we'll be using this product here, the Messages API, where we can write one set of code and kind of build applications that work across SMS, Facebook Messenger, Viber, and WhatsApp. We'll be using Facebook today. We're going to build a simple Facebook bot. It's not going to be clever, but what it will do is it will store messages in a database when they are received by a user or from a user. And then when we get a particular keyword that we can pick later, probably recap or replay or something like that, we will go to the database and return every message we've been sent to date. Of course, it's really extendable. You can do whatever you want with this data. You can do much more clever things, but all we're going to do today is store them in a database and recall them. And then you can do something a bit more complex with it if you're interested. I'm going to do some quick shameless plugs though before we start. I also, when my Vonage hat is not on, run a conference series called You Got This. And the reason I'm raising this is because I think it's particularly important for this audience. It's a conference series about core skills, sometimes called soft skills, but they're skills that require emotional labor, kind of skills that you need to have a successful and happy, healthy work life, but often don't get spoken about at tech conferences. There's a set of talks that are all recorded with transcripts and resources, and I encourage you to go take a look at that. If you enjoyed this workshop, I also want to encourage you to check out twitch.tv/VonageDevs. This is where me and my colleagues do live streams. There are currently, I believe, 3 that happen every week. There's Lauren Learns Things on Tuesdays, where Lauren will invite a colleague or community member to, well, teach her something live on air, and you get to kind of run through that learning experience. The developer drop-in, which is every other week, which is a much more kind of casual session where you can go along and ask questions around the theme and have the host kind of talk to you about them. On every other Wednesday, there's the low-code hour. So in this stream, Sam and Yulia look at low-code tools, things like Zapier and Node.js. My stream is No Experience Required, which is a beginner-friendly coding stream. You can come in with 0 programming knowledge and hopefully leave with a working project by the end. And then swapping out with me every other week on a Friday is Michael Jolly with the Late Night Build, which is, it's like a late night show meets a tech conference. There's a musical guest, a hackathon that runs throughout, and it is really a lot of fun. This workshop I originally ran as a stream on No Experience Required, and actually I'm doing another episode tomorrow. So that's 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern, and you can figure out the time zones if you are not in one of those two. But hopefully we can join you, and they're all recorded, so you can take a look at those. Okay, let's kind of start just going straight into the workshop. We're going to need a few things. We're going to be building this project in Node.js. So if you don't already have Node.js, this is your 2-minute warning to go install it. Go to nodejs.org and grab the installer. You're also, I hope it goes without saying, you're going to need a Facebook account. If you don't already have one, again, quickly go and acquire one. And if you have one, go log in. And you're going to need a Vonage API account. If you want to sign up, you can go to developer.nextmode.com. Actually, that should probably be dashboard, just to save you clicking this button. Dashboard.nextmode.com. Sign up for an account. You can provide this coupon code that gives you 10 euros of credit and also lists the account restrictions. I will give you time to grab this when it is time to do this. So some other kind of setup I've done here. I've set up a folder on my desktop just called Facebook Bot. It's currently completely empty. There's nothing in it at all. So create a directory, an empty one, open it in a code editor of choice, and we'll come back to this in a moment. So let's talk about how this is going to work. We're going to set up an application on the Vonage API platform, and that application will have linked to it a Facebook page. You can build bots for Facebook pages. Every time a message gets sent to that page, we'll link this page with our application. Every time a message gets sent to this page, the data related to that incoming message will get sent to our application. We're going to need to store it and maybe respond to special keywords, as we said. So let's go. So we're going to run this application locally. It's an Express application. It will run on localhost 3000, as is pretty standard for building Node applications, Express applications. You can probably hear Doggo. He's very excited by building Facebook bots. But the Vonage API platform needs to send this data to an endpoint somewhere on the web, and it can't access our local host. So what we're going to need to do is find a way to get our application live on the web. There are multiple ways of doing this. One way is, I'm going to shut the door because Doggo is barking quite a lot. Hopefully, that keeps him a little quieter. We'll see. So our API platform is going to need to, ping an API endpoint somewhere on the public web. Our application isn't live, so there are a few ways we can make it live. We can upload it to a server somewhere, but the development experience of doing that isn't going to be that fantastic because we're going to have to constantly update files on the server and possibly restart whatever's running. Another way of doing this is using a tool called ngrok. So if you open a terminal, doesn't matter where it is on your system, it doesn't need to be in the directory of your project. And you can type in npx ngrok http 3000. You don't need to install it ahead of time. npx will run the script straight from npm. But what this has done is it's given us this temporary public URL that will forward requests to our local host. So this is on the public web, and it is equivalent to whatever is on localhost 9000. So as we save files, you can still access it using this ngrok URL, and they'll be updated. So I'm just going to copy that to my clipboard for now. So we're running ngrok. That's open over here. I'm just going to leave that on in the background. So next, so we're kind of still in this setup phase. Next, let's talk about setting up a Facebook page. You can go to facebook.com/pages/create, set up a page in either of these categories. A community or public figure, I think, asks you fewer questions. You don't need to do anything fancy. You don't need to upload an image. You don't need to answer all the questions. You can just hit get started, provide a name for your page and a category, and hit continue. And that page will magically exist. Once the page exists, I'm not going to do this because I created one ahead of time, or rather, this is one that I use when I run this workshop. If you go to your page and you go to the About, you'll see this m.me link. This is a link to open a Messenger conversation with your page. And this will be where you type messages to your page and where our application will eventually be picking them up. I've already got it open back here in this kind of background window. And so I'm now going to shut Facebook to stop embarrassing things popping up, but I can access my page over here. I've done that ahead of time. Next, let's talk about setting up a Vonage API account. So as I said, if you go to dashboard.nextmode.com, you can sign up for an account. I have an account, shock horror, and I'm already logged into it. Also, doubly shock horror. But in here, you set up your account and you log in. Now, there are a couple of things I'm going to draw your attention to that I want you to copy and just store somewhere, but I'm not going to show you mine. The first is this API key, and the second is this API secret. So you can just copy that and store it somewhere for later, or come back here and grab it when we need it later. This API secret you should not share with people. Between the API key and the API secret, you give people access to use quite a lot of functionality in your account, including things which have a charge. So if you think someone has seen your secret, you can regenerate your secret, which will invalidate your old one. Just keep that in mind. Do not share your secret. If you're putting stuff in GitHub, keep this out of your Git repository, put it in your Git ignore file, do something to stop people seeing this. Again, I kind of have these on hand in a way where we can use them without me showing you my key and secret. Finally, before we actually create our application, we have this kind of Facebook page over here, and we have this Vonage. We have this Facebook page over here, and we have our Vonage account over here. Now we need to somehow link them. The way to do that is to head to, and there is a link, I think, over in messages and dispatch settings, which is the product we're using. But I can just shortcut that and tell you to go to messenger.nextmode.com. Make sure you're on HTTPS, messenger.nextmode.com. You log in with your account. You provide your API key and secret. They're the two things we just grabbed. You can ignore the application ID, and the page will appear here. So this Kevin Lewis one is the page that I've been using and the page that I showed you earlier. Then you just want to hit subscribe, and that is now accessible in your Vonage API account. All right, that's all the setup. Let's quickly recap what we did here. We created a new folder locally. We run npx to get an application that will run on localhost 3000, but isn't currently because it doesn't exist, and put it on a publicly accessible, though temporary, ngrok URL, which we'll be using in a moment. We set up a Facebook page, and we link that page to our Vonage API account using messenger.nexmo.com. Now let's create our actual application in the Vonage API dashboard, and then we'll build the application in Node. So if you head over to your, oh, by the way, the coupon, if you go to your name and hit coupons, you can just put MLH fail 10 straight in there and hit submit. That'll give you 10 euros of credit and lift the restrictions on your account. Once you've done that, head to your applications and create a new application. Let's just kind of take a look at what's here and just take it in. Firstly, we provide a name. We can call it whatever we want. I'll call mine Facebook bot. Again, that's whatever you want. Next, we're going to generate a public and private key pair. So we're not going to get too much into this, but this private.key file will be used for authenticating ourselves with the Vonage API when we write our code later. They come in two parts. The public key is stored in your account, and the private key is stored securely on your systems, not too securely for this. We're just going to pop it in the project folder and we use it to authenticate ourselves. So I'm just going to put this in our empty Facebook bot folder. So we should now see this private.key file. Next, we're going to turn on the messages capability. And we see that there are two things that are required here. An inbound URL. So this URL will have data sent to it every time that we get a new message sent to our application, which will be our Facebook page, but could also be our Viber page, our WhatsApp page, and then this status URL. So this will get updates whenever we send messages, and there's updates around the status of that sent message, such as has it been delivered, has it been read, things like that. We'll take a look at this, but both are mandatory. This is where that ngrok URL comes in. So let's go. Here's the ngrok URL /inbound, which doesn't exist yet, but it will. We also have this status endpoint. We'll just go URL /status. Then we're going to hit generate new application, and that application now exists. We see here, there's our URLs. There's an application ID. We'll need that later. And we can link a phone number to this application from if we get a Vonage phone number, but we can also link external accounts. And these are accounts that we have added to our account. We've linked to our account using this messenger.nexmo.com link. So I'm just going to link my page that I created. That's now linked. So every time this page gets a message, this URL will be sent some data. If you have any questions at any point, by the way, do pop them in the chat. It's only here, so I can keep an eye on it. So this URL, localhost 3000 /inbound, which in turn is this ngrok URL /inbound, doesn't exist yet. So now we are going to get to writing some code. Remember, we'll need this application ID later, so just keep this page open or copy it and store it somewhere. Let's go over to our code editor. We are now ready. I'm going to, this kind of basic Express setup, I'm going to go through quite quickly and just explain quickly as I go. If you have questions, again, feel free to ping me in the chat. Also feel free to ping me in the MLH Fellows Discord, where I'm there and able to kind of answer questions. So we're going to create a new package.json file by typing in npm init -y. -y answers all of the questions that otherwise would come up with their default answer. So now we have this package.json file. Now we need to install some dependencies. npm install, and we are going to install Express and body parser, which are quite standard for setting up web servers with Node.js. We're also going to install Nexmo and then the @ and beta. This is because messages, the Messages API, which is where the Facebook bot integration comes in, is currently in beta. So you need the beta version of the Node SDK. And finally, we're going to install NEDB and hit enter. So NEDB is a really, really simple database that runs locally on your computer. it's file based. So what it will do is it'll actually just create a file in the folder and use that as the data store. You can do things more complex. You can connect it to an external database or a hosted MongoDB instance, for example. But for the sake of this project, this isn't a how to set up a database workshop, so we're just going to use AnyDB, which has a very, very similar API to MongoDB. So the transition, should you want to make it, should be okay. All right, let's create a new file called index.js and actually start writing some code. Firstly, let's create a new Express application. So there's our Express application. We're also going to include body parser, which allows us to kind of dip in more easily to the requests that get sent from the Vonage API platform. So body parser. And now we have body parser, but we're not really doing anything with it. So we have to tell our Express application that we want to use body parser with a couple of settings. We can do that with app.use body parser.json and app.use body parser.url encoded. Oh, butterfingers, I feel it already this morning. And then this takes an object with extended true. This is, again, if you've set up Express applications in the past, this should look very familiar to you. I'm actually just going to hide the sidebar because we're pretty much just going to work in this file. Finally, we are going to actually spin up this server and listen on a port. So app.listen, app.listen 3000, and that's it. That's our server running. So we can now run node index.js and our server will run. Can I hide this? Hide floating meeting controls. And you notice like it hasn't immediately exited. That's because it will continue to run until it fails or until you stop it running with Control and C. So I'll stop that for now. So let's talk again about the two endpoints that we need to create in order to get this to work. The first endpoint is the inbound endpoint. And this will have data sent to it every time a message is sent to our page. We also need to create a status endpoint. Both need to exist, and both as a minimum have to return an HTTP code 200, which means everything is okay. If that is not done, the Vonage API platform will keep trying to hit your endpoint until it does get a 200. So you might end up with duplicate messages, which is not what we want. So returning a 200 when it is successful is what is necessary. Let's also talk about HTTP methods and how to put together endpoints in Express.js. To put together an endpoint, we type in app dot and then a method, a path, and then a function, which takes in a request and a response. Now this method here can be any HTTP method that Express supports. The most common ones you'll probably see are GET requests or POST requests. You might also see put requests, patch requests, delete requests, delete requests. For the sake of this though, our API, it does actually say here when we set up our application, it does explicitly tell us this is going to be a POST request. So we already know to expect that. So we can go app.post and we can put in any path we want here and that will be a valid endpoint, but we've already said it will be two specific endpoints. There will be an inbound endpoint and a status endpoint. And at minimum, we said that these needed to return a response with a status of 200 at the very least. So this is a valid endpoint. This would be fine. It wouldn't do any logic. Logic needs to go up here, but it would do fine. What we're going to do though is we're going to just console.log the request.body just to see what's happening there. We're also going to, so the status endpoint we're not going to use in this workshop, but it does need to exist and it does need to return a 200. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. Okay, that should work fine. So now what we're going to do is we are going to rerun our server. Everything seems fine. And we're going to message our page. Hello, MLH fellows. And hopefully we should see that message. Here we are, print in our console. Let's take a little look at what's going on here. So this is the inbound endpoint. And the request.body is an object, which contains a message UUID, a unique identifier. I really do not want these floating meeting controls. 2, which is an object, which contains a type, which in this case is messenger, because it's a Facebook message. And this to ID is the ID of our page. So that's a page ID. And then again, we have a from object, which contains an ID. This is the ID of my Facebook user. So that's unique to my account with a type of messenger, a timestamp, a direction. And this message object, which contains a content object, which in turn contains a type of text. It can also contain a type of like image, and there are some other types as well. And the text, hello MLH fellows. What we really care about here is we have the to, which is the Facebook page ID, the from, which is the user ID, and we have this text, which is what we'll need to store. Okay, we now have this data coming in. Now we need to do something with it. At the moment, it hits the terminal and then it disappears into the ether forever. There's no log it's ever happened. And this is the point where we're going to set up our database. I'm going to show you how it works, and then we're going to store some messages in it. So we are going to create a new variable. You can call it anything you want. I'm going to call mine NEDB and require the NEDB package. And then we're going to initialize it. I'm going to create a new variable called messages, and this will be a new NEDB instance. And in this object, there are a couple of options that we can pass. The first is a file name. So I'm going to call this messages.db, and we'll see what this does in a moment. And then the second one is going to be auto load true. This is not a mandatory line. If we missed it out though, we would later have to load the database. Now we're just saying as soon as this application runs, load it, and then it's there. Okay, so we've created this database which will auto load. This means the first time this runs, it will create it. If it doesn't exist, it will create it, and if it exists, then it will load it and use it. Now in our inbound handler, let's replace this console log with code that will actually insert this message into a database. So we can go messages.insert, and the first parameter has to be an object. Fortunately, as we saw, request.body is already an object. It looks like this. You can do some work before we get to this line to maybe change data a little bit, or maybe just store what you need. For the sake of this workshop though, we're going to store the entire object. And then there is a callback function, which has an error and it has a document. If there's an error, then we will return console.log error. And then I suppose we probably better log that error, or we'll never know what it is. If there isn't an error though, we will, in fact, I might just, for readability purposes, use this kind of extended syntax. If there is no error though, we will console.log new record, and we can add to that, or we can also log the document, and we can take a look at that. All right, let's restart our Node server, and let's send another message to the page. Okay, and we see there is a new record. We'll see that like this object that's being returned, this document, looks almost identical to this document, but there is one addition, this _ID. This is a property automatically provided by NEDB as a unique identifier. As it happens, excuse me, there already is a unique identifier, but NEDB doesn't know that. It will create its own as well. We can also see that this messages.db file has been created. And this is our database. It's just this file on our computer. Let me hide the sidebar and close that. So we've got our new document. Wonderful. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to send a message in response. You know what we'll do? We'll send a few messages. We'll say hello, hi, sup, yo, and we'll just check that all of those have been stored. You might think that this is a JSON object, like an array. It isn't. They're not comma separated, but on every new line is a new document. So now we've got we've kind of seeded this data set with a few messages. So as I said, next thing we're going to do is send a response back to the user, because while we know data is being stored, our users don't. Our users just think, again, our messages are disappearing into nothingness, and we want to send something in response here. Now's the point where we're going to need to use that Messages API. First thing we're going to do is we are going to include the Nexmo library. I'm going to use capital N here, and you'll see why in a moment. And we are going to include Nexmo. And then I'm going to create an instance of that. I'll use lowercase n here. So when we're using the initialized client, we'll use lowercase. And here we'll go new Nexmo and an object full of options. There are 4 things we need to provide here. The first is an API key. The second is the API secret. And remember, we got these from our dashboard. We got these from the home page of our dashboard. Here it is. API key in secret. We're going to need an application ID. And finally, we're going to need a private key. Right, let's talk about where each of these come from. You can put the strings straight in here if you want. Just be sure if you do this that you're not sharing this file with other people, because as I said, your API secret in particular, you don't want to share with others. I already have mine accessible using process.env.nexmo key, I think is what I've called it. And that is equivalent to a string, which is my account's API key. And then we have Nexmo secret. Next is our application ID. I mentioned we would need this. So if I refresh this applications page and copy the application ID, that can go straight in as a string. Finally, the private key. The private key can be provided in one of 2 ways. It can be provided as a buffer, or it can be provided as a string, which is a path file to the private.key file. Private.key file is here in the same folder, so we can just do /private.key. So we've now set up the Nexmo node library. Next thing we're going to do now is actually send a message in response. Now we're going to want to send a message not only if it's successful, but also if there's an error, just so our users know that there has been a problem and they get some feedback. Because we're going to do it in several places, I'm going to create a reusable function to do this. I'm going to create a function called send message. There's going to be 3 parameters. There's going to be the sender, the recipient, and the actual text that we're going to send. So what do we do here? Well, when we send messages, there are going to be three things that we need to provide to the Nexmo library. The first is an object describing who we are sending the message to. And actually, it looks pretty much identical to how it came to us. So there's going to be a type of messenger, as you see, and there's going to be an ID. And the ID will be the recipient. So we'll have to pass in a Facebook user ID here. So that's 2. Next, we need to kind of say which page is it coming from. So we are going to say from, and again, it's going to look the same. So we have type messenger and an ID of the sender. And finally, again, it really does look similar to what came in. We are going to need to create a message. And the message is going to be an object exactly the same as here, which inside of it has content, which inside of it has a type and some text. So text is equal to text. You can actually shorthand this in JavaScript, just text like so. So now we have these 3 pieces of information. Let's actually go send a message. To do this, we can go nexmo.channel.send to, from, and message. And that's it. That's how we send a message. There is an optional 4th parameter, which is a callback function, which can return an error or data about the message that we sent. And we're going to do the same thing here, just for our peace of mind. If something goes wrong, we will get some logs back. So we'll say if error, then return console.log. In fact, I don't think we need the return here because we're going to use an else. So we're going to go console.log, Nexmo error, and then we'll just print the error. I really don't want this bar. you know, I think I'm just going to have to come to terms with the fact that every time I hit escape, it'll appear again. And if there is not an error, then we'll console.log nextmo response, and we'll go response. Again, though, this is optional. It's just useful to have some logs if something goes wrong. But you need to, you need from, and you need message. Let's hit save. Let's restart our application. Let's see what happens if we message the page. Oh, nothing. Why? Because we've created the function, but we're not actually using it. Let's go and do that. So we'll console.log the error, and then we will send message. And what do we say? The first parameter is the sender. So the sender will be our page ID, which is equivalent to request.body.to.id based on this data structure. The second parameter is going to be the recipient. So essentially it's going to be the same, but to will be swapped out with from. And finally, a message. Something went wrong. And I'll just wrap my text so it's easier to read. Now, if it was successful, we should also send a message, except this time we'll say, thanks, we got your message, or something like that. Right, now let's restart the Node server and message the page. All right, so we got a response. Thanks, we got your message. Let's see what happened here, because there was quite a few things that printed. All right. So we got this new record, we got the response, which tells us what the message ID is. And then we got these 3 additional console logs. This first one has a message UUID, same one here actually. And we see here it's 2 from the timestamp, and we see that its status is submitted. Next, we see same UUID, so we can kind of follow through the journey of this single message using this unique identifier. And now it's been delivered, and again, it's been read. So you have access to that, and these are logging from the status endpoint. Now, I wanted to show you what it did, so I left the console login, but because we're not using it, I'm actually going to remove that console.log so we don't have so many things logging to our console. But just understand that's what the status endpoint does. Status gets hit after we send messages. And as we see, we got a response. So this is all going pretty well. We're making pretty good time. The other thing I said we would do, because we're still storing these messages here, all of the messages we've sent. The other thing we need to do though, is we said that we would create a keyword, and when someone types in that keyword, we will return to them every message that they have sent to us to date. The way we're going to do this is in this inbound handler. First thing we're going to want to do really is we're going to want to check if, and we'll write this code in a moment, if keyword is used, then we will go to the logic. And if the keyword isn't used, i.e. we don't use the word, I think we'll settle on recap, then we're going to put this code in. Oh. Then we are going to put this code in like so. Right, let's figure out what we need to put in here. How do we determine what keyword has come in? And we're going to just use baked in text methods, JavaScript text methods to do this. So if the request.body.message.text, so that's the message that was sent to us, is equal to recap, then we'll do something. Now, there are a few additional things here. If they give us a capital R, it stops working. They're not equivalent. If there's like a space at the beginning or a space at the end, it's no longer equivalent. So we'll use as I said, a couple of built-in text methods to help us with this. Firstly, we'll push whatever comes into lowercase. And because we're comparing it to a lowercase string, it doesn't matter whether they do recap or they do recap or they do recap. They will all be, whether they type that, we're going to push it all to lowercase. We're also going to trim any white space. So if there is space at the beginning or the end, we will get rid of it. These kind of extra characters. All right, now let's do this logic. What are we going to do here? So we need to go and grab messages from the database from the user who sent us a message. That is the task. To do this, we can go messages.find. And again, very similar to MongoDB syntax here. And in here, messages.find will return every message. We want to add like a filter, a search. So we can provide that as an option here. And we're going to say where from.id is equal to request.body.from.id. So now we're only going to grab messages from the user who has just sent us the word recap. Then we have a callback function, same as before, very similar pattern. So we have an error and we have documents. Here we are. And if there is an error, then we will console.log error and just console log the error so we know what's up. We should also probably send a message to tell the user that even though they sent us the word recap, there's a problem. If there isn't an error, however, well, actually, let's just start by console logging documents and seeing what has happened. So we'll save that. We'll restart our server. And we'll type in the word recap. All right, we've got an error. Too lowercase of undefined. All right, that means request.body.message.text. It didn't like that. Let's figure out what we did here. Oh, because it's message.content.text. All right, let's restart the Node server and try that again. What happened there? I think this is the same error as before. Yeah. All right, let's just clear this and let's run it again. Recap again. Let's see what's going on here. Ah, there we are. All right, so we get messages returned. As it happens, we are all of the messages because they've only been sent from our page. But it would be filtering them at this point, should we have more. And it's just returning as an array of objects. That's what gets returned from messages.find. We can't send an array, we need to send a string back. So we're going to need to do something with this. Firstly, so documents as an array. We're going to use some functional programming, JavaScript functional programming. We're going to use the map function. We don't want all of this really. We really only care about the message they sent and maybe the time they sent it. So what we're going to do here is we are going to create an array, create a variable, and we'll call this messages. And this will be equivalent to documents.map, document, function, document. And we can return just segments of this. So we will return document.message.content.text. That's all we're going to return. We're going to restart our server. We're going to send a message, recap. Just give that a moment. Oh, yeah, right. And then we need to console.log messages. Okay, and so now it's kind of taken these big arrays and it is now returning a new array, same length. So every message is represented here, but we're just pulling out the individual text. We could do something else with this. We could say, you know, I want the text, plus I also want you to send sent at, and then we could go document.timestamp. So now if we restart the server and type in recap, we now see hello, sent at, and then this date. You might want to do something with the date formatting here, but I think we'll just leave it as is. And then finally, this is still an array and it still needs to become a string. So we need to turn this array into a string. So what we're going to do is we're going to go const message string, and this will be equal to messages.join, which is an array method that allows us to combine array items into a single string. Messages.join, and then you put in a delimiter. I'm just going to put empty quotes and we'll see what happens here. So we're going to go message string and hit save. Restart the server, type in the word recap. Okay, it is now one string, but there's nothing separating each message. Whatever we put in here is what will, well, it's what will separate each message. We could put like a dot and it will separate them with dots. We can also use \n, and they will add new lines. So if I restart now, it's still one string, but now they're separated by the first \n pushes it to the new line, and the next one pushes it to the new line. So there's a line in between with no content. Let's finally send this message back to the user. Instead of console.logging this, we will console.log message string, restart the server, type in hi there. We should get a response. Great. Then we can type in recap. And we now get every message that we sent. Yes. Is that correct? Are they in order? Are they in order? Looks to me like they're not in order. But you can do sorting. You can do sorting here. Yeah, that's kind of what I had in mind for this workshop. So let's talk a little bit about what you might do as next steps. So we receive data from users, and then once we receive it, we can do anything we want with it. We could go off to a translation service. We could go off to APIs that do stuff like weather reporting or transport data reporting. We could send it off to a service like Dialogflow, which can do kind of basic conversational intelligence and kind of pick out keywords and figure out the intent of what someone is messaging you. You could use it just for Q&A. You might choose to just kind of use this as a way of gathering data from people, like send us messages and we'll ask them to the speaker. You know, here's a Facebook page or a WhatsApp page or a Viber page to do that. The cool thing about this API though is you can use WhatsApp, Viber, and Messenger using the exact same API, the exact same code with very, very small changes. So for example, instead of doing type messenger, you would do a type Viber number and you would provide a phone number. But other than that, it would be here. But other than that, it would be the exact same code. You can also do cool things, obviously, because we tell you what platform the inbound message has come from, where you could have one application where people could interact with it fully and receive responses using the platform that they've initially messaged with. You can also, as I said, send messages via SMS using the Messages API as well. That's pretty much everything I wanted to share with you. If you wanted to get this online, obviously this ngrok URL relies on our computer being on, connected to the internet, and ngrok running. And even then, as soon as you shut ngrok, the URL regenerates, or every 24 hours they time out. So you would want to host this somewhere where you can run an Express application, or perhaps run it in a serverless fashion. I've run a couple of workshops for this program already around serverless, and hopefully you could kind of apply knowledge. But that's everything I had in mind. So, kindly share the gist. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that in the Discord after this. I'll just share this file here. Just as a heads up, if you kind of wanted to recap this, I also have a stream recording. It's slightly longer, slightly slower. It's 2 hours, but yeah, it recaps all of this as well. But yes, I'll share this code in the MLH Fellows Discord after this session is over. Yeah, that was kind of everything I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Really do appreciate it. It sounds like the people who came along really had a good time. If you do have any more questions for Kevin, he is hanging around in our Discord server and is more than happy to help out. So if you decide to have a play around and see what you can do, I'm sure he'll be happy to help.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much.